welcome for all of you who are tuned in. You're tuned in to TMH English Daily News. As we move on to our headlines for today, outbreaks of deadly childhood diseases is on a rise in Ethiopia's Tigray region. Ethiopia rejects the UN report on Tigray and terms it rubbish and mockery, and Canada deplores movement of the Eritrean forces across Ethiopia's border into the Tigray region. As we move on to our main updates for today, outbreaks of deadly childhood diseases has risen in the Ethiopia's Tigray region. Plummeting child vaccination rates are attributed to the siege imposed by the 7 million population of Tigray by the Ethiopian federal government. Tamnit Bayru has more on these details.
Deadly childhood diseases such as measles, tetanus, and whooping cough are on the rise in Ethiopia's Tigray region after vaccination rates plunged during the civil war that broke out nearly 2 years ago. The percentage of children in Tigray receiving routine vaccines has fallen below 10% this year. Data from the Tigray Health Bureau shows undoing years of government efforts to boost immunization rates. The hopes of the children in the region to grow healthier and happier were snatched away in a blink of an eye, the Bureau said in a letter this month to the Global Vaccine Alliance, Gavi. The letter, seen by Reuters, blamed the decline in vaccination on supply shortages caused by what is called a siege of Tigray by Ethiopian federal forces, power outages that have disrupted vaccine cold chains, and the inability of people in rural areas to reach health facilities. A ceasefire between March and late August between Tigrayan federal forces allowed a trickle of medical aid, but humanitarian access has been suspended since fighting resumed. A UN commission of human rights experts said on Monday. The experts said in a report that they had reasonable grounds to believe that the denial of access to health care and other aid by federal authorities amounts to a crime against humanity. In its letter, the Tigray Health Bureau said that the percentage of children receiving the full 3 doses of the pentavalent vaccine against diphtheria, whooping cough, and tetanus, hepatitis B, and Haemophilus influenza type B dropped from 99.3% in 2020 to 36% in 2021 and 7% this year. The rate across Ethiopia was 65% in 2021, according to data from the UN's children's agency, UNICEF. The letter said the percentages of children being vaccinated against tuberculosis and measles have also plummeted from over 90% in 2020 to less than 10% this year. It is said there have been measles outbreaks in 10 of the region's 35 districts since the war began, and 25 cases of neonatal tetanus this year, compared to just two in each of the previous 3 years. Vaccines are given for free across Ethiopia, but they are not coming to Tigrayan children, said Fasika Amdasilase, a surgeon at Ida Referral Hospital. She has said treated children for measles and whooping cough. Gavi, which buys and distributes vaccines for developing countries, said it had provided measles and COVID-19 vaccines during the ceasefire, but some activities have been suspended since fighting resumed. Ethiopia's health minister, Lia Taddese, said 860,000 doses of measles vaccines were delivered to Tigray last December, and additional doses were delivered on April 2nd. Another planned delivery is on hold at the instruction of the UN Food Program, which coordinates humanitarian deliveries into Tigray. Lia Taddese said in a statement to Reuters. WFP spokesperson Claire Neville, however, said the agency was waiting on clearances from the Ethiopian government. In the absence of these clearances, the delivery of life-saving humanitarian supplies, including food, nutrition, and medical items, will have to be on hold, she said.
Thank you and welcome back. As we move on to our next update, meanwhile, the Ethiopian government still has the Tigray region under complete siege, but they also reject the UN report on the Tigray terms, and it terms it rubbish and mockery. Ethiopian on Tuesday rejected a report by the UN investigators that accused Addis Ababa and their government of possible ongoing crimes against humanity in its war-torn Tigray region, including using starvation as a weapon. The International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia said that the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, a Nobel laureate, and its allies were internationally causing great suffering by denying aid to the Tigray region and 7 million people. Ethiopia's permanent representative to the UN in Geneva, Zaneba Kabeda, said the commission was politically motivated and their conclusions were self-contradictory and biased. The envoy denied that the government of Ethiopia used humanitarian aid as an instrument of war and described the report once again as mockery and rubbish. Therefore, we have no other options but to reject this report. The International Crisis Group's senior Ethiopian analyst, William Davison, said the International Commission of Human Rights Experts report is in theory the beginning of an international process of accountability for the atrocities that have been committed. Let's take a listen.
In theory, this is the beginnings of a process of an international process of accountability for those responsible for these crimes. So could it lead to some shift in the calculations because of that? That's possible, but with the momentum to war just increasing every day, really, it's very unlikely to impact that in the short term.
On possible repercussions of the new flare-up on civilians, he had this to say.
They're the same risks that the civilians have suffered so far. There have been direct attacks on civilians, killings, and sexual violence in Tigray and outside because of the restrictions placed upon Tigray. Obviously, there's been very serious attendant humanitarian consequences for millions of people. So obviously, if the conflict continues to escalate and spreads further, then civilians elsewhere will face similar hardship.
The International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia's report disclosed that war crimes and crimes against humanity, in fact, have been committed on the Tigrayan people. Carrie Beatty Murungi, one of the Commission's 3 independent rights experts and its chair, said denial of food, medicine, and basic services was heavy, devastating impact on the civilian population. She continues to say we have reasonable grounds to believe it amounts to crimes against humanity, as she said on Monday following the release of the report on the Commission's first. We also have reasonable grounds to believe that the federal government is using starvation as a method of warfare. Canada deplores the reported movement of the Eritrean Defense Forces across Ethiopia's border into the Tigray region. Foreign Policy Canada said Canada condemns this escalation of conflict and calls on all parties to find a path towards peace and stability for the entire region. U.S. Special Envoy to the region Mike Hammer, who returned from an 11-day stay in Ethiopia, said Washington had been tracking Eritrean troop movements across the entire border. Let's take a listen.
Tracking Eritrean troop movements across the border. They are extremely concerning and we condemn it. All external foreign actors should respect Ethiopia's territorial integrity and avoid fueling the conflict. We couldn't be any clearer. We've said this repeatedly. We will encourage those that might be able to communicate directly with Asmara that this is of extreme concern and must stop. I'm not going to lean forward in terms of other measures that we might be able to undertake, but really this is a conflict from which Ethiopians, Tigrayans, Afars, Amharans have suffered greatly. And the presence of Eritrean troops in Ethiopia only serves to complicate matters and to inflame an already tragic situation.
Last week, Eritrean authorities issued a general call for mobilization. As the diaspora continues to plead for the international community's help, Chicago chefs team up to provide aid to Ethiopia's war-torn Tigray region. A group of Chicago chefs have organized a night of culture, music, and food to aid people on the brink of famine in Ethiopia's Tigray region. Earlier this year, Chicago chefs rallied to cook for Ukrainians, and it was an event that raised hundreds of thousands of dollars in humanitarian aid due to the war in Ukraine. And now local chefs are teaming up again, this time for Tigray and the region of Ethiopia. As we move on to our final updates for today, Ethiopia's Ministry of Education Universities contributes over 210.9 million birr, nearly $5 million US, plus materials to the Ethiopian Defense Force that are waging genocidal war on the Tigray region. Ethiopia's Ministry of Education and the universities get funds and grants from international development partners such as the World Bank and as well as research institutes as well. Grants and funds obtained from the international development partners have thus been channeled to Ethiopia's genocidal war project on Tigray and this ongoing conflict. As we finish up for today, thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.